Now we're getting to the thick books in this series. So far, every story's either been like one 300-page book or two 300-page books, but now we have like one 700-page book, 500-something page book, and it's so good. I'm so excited for this. This is also a very special book to me for multiple reasons. As you can tell, this isn't in English, it's in Danish, and it's the first book I ever bought for myself with my own money back when I was a kid. And the reason why I bought this one specifically was because it was the one I was like the next one in the series when I was reading it, but also because John Flanagan came to a local bookstore in the city I was growing up in and had a signing session. So this book is very special to me because he signed it. And yeah, so it's like super special to me. But let's dig down and talk about the cover. So given there's a lot of versions on the internet for the English version, we're going to talk about the Danish one here. The cover is fairly obvious in what it's trying to show. We're going to the desert and the hooded person standing looking at some camel riders is Will, of course. And I think the reason that Will has been placed like this away from the group is a reference to Will being like not with the group. A lot of the time he's gonna be separated from them. So it's that like I think he's then looking at the group almost in envy. And then of course we have the sun here, which has a very prominent role in the like almost in the center, like in the center line. Really highlighting the writers, but also the sun is a very prominent, almost character in this book. So it makes sense that it's gonna be like so important in this. Also, it sells the heat and the desert vibe in this orange and black theme, which just works always. But I actually think it's a reference to how important the sun is. Then of course we got author, title of the series, and the swirly backdrop that we're used to. See, it's just like normal, and I like it more this way than the big stone metal thing we usually get. I think this is more neat. It makes the cover image stand out on its own. What I don't like are two things. One, Will looks horribly out of place the way he's placed and done. Also, what's going on with this bow? I don't know much about archery, but I feel like the bow is I feel like the bowstring should be going across his chest, and the bow itself should be going like along his quiver. That's a little weird. Also, the color, like using the green for his cloak, I know it's usually what the rangers use and all that, but it does not look that good in this cover. It really does not. I also don't like that we here, let me just got the name of the publisher in Denmark, and I honestly don't like that at all. What I do like about the Danish one is if you translate the Danish title of the book, it's just called Ransom. It's not called Erak's Ransom or anything, it's just Ransom, because that's the entire thing in the story. So yeah, I would move this one down here. The English version I would just call it Ransom, and fix the bow, maybe give Will the sand-colored cloak instead. Other than that, I think it's a really nice cover. It sells the book very well, and I'm excited. Let's get to the story itself. As always, this series is filled with humor all the time. It's from page one a funny book without losing the seriousness of the series at the same time. It's kind of wild that Flanagan can do that. Holt and Pauline is such a funny couple to me. You could tell all along in the series that they were a couple, but finally they tied the knot. The planning for the wedding was funny, not the most important scene in the world, but it was a great little funny character moment and establishing the relationship. What I didn't like was the capture of Erak. Not because it wasn't well planned, because it was, but it was too easy. It even highlighted how easy the Scandians felt it was to get into the city. And I would have loved it if there was more suspicion from Erak. he is supposed to be very experienced in raiding cities. So it would be great if he maybe had posted like guards or seen the traps and commented on it or whatever, something, you know. Maybe not seen them as traps, but been like, I wonder what they're for, and then later realize what they were. I don't know, something. The wedding was super sweet though when we got back to that, because the book skips a little back and forth, so will we. And looking at the wedding, it was, for the small part we got to see of it, super sweet and nice. And I'm not sure I enjoyed getting a recap from Baron Harold instead. I think it's fine, but I think when you look at the target demographic, they're probably not too interested in weddings, so it's probably okay we only get it like that. But I would have definitely wanted to hear more and see more of what happened. Next on we get the briefing scene, and I think it was very much meant as a lecture to young readers. A lot of the time the sentiment of the people with a lot of privileges also have the biggest responsibilities. Like that's the sentiment the book gives. Now this is great, that's a perfect sentiment, that's how it should be, but it's not really what it is in the real world. I do wish though, so if they take that away, that if you want privilege you need to be aware of something or whatever, definitely worth it. And then we end this section with our usual suspects ready for another adventure in a foreign place. So let's get to part 2 where we will be discussing actually being in that foreign place. Firstly, we get the travel where the usual mocking of Halt happens. As always, that's a treat. And like he gets some really great revenge on Svengal, so that was also awesome and funny. And then we get to Aridia, and the introduction to Celesthin is fine and all. You can tell he's important, and as a young reader you aren't in doubt that he's either he isn't just a captain, or if he is, then he's like Halt, the actual leader. And it's funny to see Evelyn trying to act high and mighty, but given she says it's difficult for her to keep a straight face, it would be nice to see her falter. Otherwise it just looks like empty words, and that's what I felt it was. And I love the scene with the fake Vakir, and the actual bartering afterwards were also a lot of fun. I'm not gonna comment too much on it because it was just great character moments. And what I actually really enjoyed was when Evelyn tried to make both Will and Horace jealous. They are, of course, all of them about like 19, 20-year-olds or something like that. So naturally Evelyn wants to do something like that, especially since she isn't in a relationship with either boy. I am glad to see though that it had no effect on Will due to how much he loves Alice. And for the rest of the section we are getting the desert travel, and I do have some thoughts on it. But firstly, I want to comment on something else. This book has the least amount of action of any Ranger's Apprentice book so far, and it's also the longest so far. Very few chapters feel boring or make you lose interest in the book. The closest is some of the chapters where Will is lost, we'll get to that, but they're short and there aren't that many of them. Now let's continue on with what happens in the storm. Now firstly we get the storm, and that's definitely a callback to book 3, and normally I wouldn't want the book to tell us that it's a callback, but given Will and Evelyn are both there, it makes sense for them to comment on it. Secondly, it was a bit of a Chekhov's gun situation, because in section 1, when they were sailing, they were talking about the risk of a storm at the seas. So I think it's fine, it fits narratively, it calls back to earlier events, and it was decently hinted at earlier. But it's also different enough from the first book from the first time in book 3, that it didn't feel like Flanagan was just rehashing what had already been done. And the entire storm sequence was great on its own. We got to see some character from both Tuck and Will, and what is most important, we got to see Tuck as a character. And normally ranger horses are almost not horses in a way. And I know it's a theme in the book where people are like, oh, ranger horses are so well trained, they might as well be people. But they are horses. so we want them to act that way from time to time. And after Tuck disappears, we get a really emotional scene where we really get the feeling for how important Will is to the group. Everyone wants to make him feel better, and everyone, except for Holt, is ready to let him go find Tuck. It's great, it shows how much they care and trust him. Now we get to my least favorite part, and that is when they are all just wandering the desert, like I talked about before. It's a bit of a downplay, and I think it would have been better to have all of Will's scenes here be smaller, more sporadic, or make it one long chapter and done. Because we got like 3 reminders in this book that the Red Iron Mountains made him lose his way, and then all the other mistakes he made. It felt like each of those chapters were just getting longer and longer lists, were just becoming longer and longer lists of Will's mistakes. While the other story really is only picking up right at the end of the section, where they decide to go after the desert bandits. It feels like padding, and unnecessary padding at that. And finally, we end the section with Will being saved by the Bedouins. Can't wait to see how he and Tuck react to be united. I like how Will really quickly establishes himself as a friend of the Bedouins. But I think the story here suffers from its pacing, because when Will kills the Cobra, no one saw it. And they were way too forgiving for my taste. When you think about how he almost shot their leader's grandson. I also think it would have been better if Will would have insisted on them not apologizing for getting mad at him. Because Will is the type to understand this situation very fast. And I think this is like pacing wise, that's the reason behind it. And then we have Will getting Tuck back. And I gotta admit, the race and the idea of a race, so fun, and it uses the ludomania the Bedouins all collectively have. The race itself was super fun and it was just so exciting. But I think it would have been better if Will had spent just one more day thinking about how to get his horse back and then coming up with the idea. But it was still super exciting and super fun, and it showed some great, like, not character from Tuck, but and yet still, like, it showed how smart he is and how fast he is. Meanwhile, Holt and the group are tracking the enemies, and I do love that they decide to gamble on where they're going, because it feels like something Holt and Gillen would decide on their own. What I don't think makes sense is how Holt didn't just make the decision or pull the group away from Celestine to discuss it. It seems a little weird and out of character to me, but it is a minor moment, but you know, these minor moments tends to stand out at times. But it's fine, it doesn't change anything, like I wouldn't change any plot point for this. I think it's great when we have such a huge gallery of characters on the mission that we get to see them all add something, and both Gillen and Horace have not really added much to the story so far, so sending them out to spy is a great way of giving them like a smaller task until later where Horace and Gillen can shine in the final battle. And something I think Flanagan does really well is making sure no battle feels the same. When they fight in the desert, they are surrounded and fight in a different way and with different tactic that works for the situation. I mean, they still lost, but they made the best out of a bad situation, and it felt funny, well, felt unique. Something odd is then how no matter the situation, the characters are nearly always bantering and rarely ever disturbed. I got a feeling it's because it's a children's book, and so it's to not make the book seem too sad or too serious. But when the group is taken hostage and meets Erak, there are quite a few more jokes than I would have expected and then I like. Now let's skip on ahead to the final battle, because so much is happening there, and the very first thing week one's, like, we get to see why Will is so smart. He right away found a way to get 50 soldiers into the village without being noticed, and given the enemy isn't ready for that, it is such an advantage. Now of course there are literally over 100 of the enemies, so it's not like it's going to swing the fight in the favor of the Bedouins. as pointed out by Usul himself. But it should buy the rest of the Force time to get into the city and help. Now when Usul does point this out, he is struck by a marble ball by Evelyn. The necklace was made from marbles and she could use it for a sling. It was pointed out earlier by both Will as a weird necklace and later by an enemy soldier that it was worthless. And here we see why she still had it. But the sling that was hidden in an elegant belt was probably too well woven into the belt, since it took us so long to get it out and ready. Hopefully it will be redesigned in future events. After the fight, we got some Evelyn action again, bartering with Cellophane for how much to pay him, and she outwits him perfectly in a great way. My only gripe is that the Bedouins just accept her money, though through that organization, like the Schleswigers thingy. I don't remember what it's called, but they had that organization that can move money, and they accept it right away, even though she doesn't technically have them with her. They told Will, when he tried to buy Tuck, that they only trade in gold and silver that they can carry here and now. So maybe have Umar point that out, and then Cellophane can say Umar can send an emissary with him to pick up the money, and then have Cellophane escort the money with the emissary to a pre-approved spot. It would keep the Bedouins more consistent in my opinion, but also show the increased trust and cooperation between Celophane's Iridians and Umar's Bedouins. But again, it is a bit of a minor thing, so it's fine. And then finally, we get the final chapter, which is more of an epilogue, but it's so good. The entire thing with Crowley is super funny, and it really just ends the book on the best note possible. I honestly think it's a perfect ending, especially when Evelyn and Alice at the same time get the impulsive idea to kiss Will's cheeks. It's cute, it's funny, and I won't lie if I didn't say a lot of boys in the age group of this book probably have fantasized about something like that at one point. And the final part with Horace just feels perfect. Two old friends now ready to go on their own adventures as adults and not children, not apprentices. They are fully fledged, they're ready to fly, they're ready to leave the nest. And we already know what their first adventure is gonna be, but can't wait for all the other ones, because there are many more. We're only at book 7, and I think there's 17 or 19 books in this series, so got a long way to go. It's exciting, but let's get to the conclusion. So yeah, as mentioned before, canonically this book takes place before the 2 previous books in the series, since Will is still an apprentice here. But I think that's fine, because I think it was a little sad how we didn't get to see his last year as an apprentice. And it seems mainly like a case of lack of planning from Flanagan's point, but I think it's okay. It's kept pretty much as its own little thing, and that works great as an introduction to our first big book in the series. Now, as the first book of substantial length, this is a mixed bag for me. Because at one point it did feel like it was little padded, a little rambling for its own good and repetitive, but on the other hand, it's also great just having the entire adventure going on smoothly in one book. Overall, I would say the book is good and great read for anyone who's a fan of the series. But it's far from the best book in the series, and I would say it's probably in the lower tier of books. Should probably do a tier list at some point, probably when we're done with the entire series. Maybe. Yeah, we probably should. But yeah, this one's definitely a lower tier, along with, I think it was book 3. Yeah, I think so. But yeah. So, good book, not the best. Now, that's all I have, so please leave a like, comment what you think of the book, and give it a subscribe for more reviews and bookbinding stuff. And I'll see you in the next video.